I talked about before the world being fractured and politics being kind of this divide and conquer. Well, when I read this story, my heart lit up. Labour and Tory-linked think tanks have been organised a conference, which I believe took place yesterday, to disagree well. And the message being that UK politics must learn to disagree well or risk a descent into toxic US-style culture wars. Those were three influential think tanks with links to the Conservative and Labour, and they warned that they needed to work together. So some of the groups that were there was Onward, together, and create streets think tanks. They've all come together in Coventry to talk about how we can bring people together in communities as well as politics. Joining me now is Nicholas Boy-Smith, who's CEO of Create Streets, who was part of that conference. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicholas. Earlier on in the programme, I was talking about just this divide and conquer thing and how we're becoming more divisive. As a community, there are things we can do, ways we can build our roads and our towns in order to prevent that, as well as on a political level. Is this what this was about?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, it was largely about that. It was a centre-right organisation, Onward, centre-left, Labour together, and ourselves, Create Streets. We're very much focused on places, on neighbourhoods, on how they work. And I think what brought us all together was a common concern that the forces that are pulling us apart are getting really strong, and the forces that are bringing us together are getting not quite strong enough. So, that's partly technology, social media. It's actually also just the physical planning and stewardship of our towns and villages. So, fast roads, drive-to boxland shops outside the high street. And that actually, when you ask people and look at what makes people happy, basically when they come together, streets that children can walk safely along, cycling to school, being able to meet people by chance by the coffee shop or by the pub as you go to pick up your shopping or whatever. These things really matter. It sounds trivial, and yet it's not trivial at all. It deeply affects our daily lived experience in every day of all our lives.
So I was going to say it's interesting because we were talking about Mother's Day, and we had a caller actually hark back to the old days when you had a community where mums could bump into each other, where you didn't have to drive everywhere. So you're absolutely right. That's at the nub of how we want to live.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because there are tensions here, aren't there? I was writing a book about the history of part of East London a year or so ago. There was a very moving description in that of how people would move out of the family home and move around the corner, but the mum for the young, the grandma for the young mum was still just around the corner. And that is something that people do value, and you can see it in all sorts of it. And yet, by the same token, jobs, life pulls us all apart. So nostalgia is not a bad thing in itself, but we can't just be nostalgic. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't turn back to 1910, and there are lots of bad things about 1910 we wouldn't want if we could. We do have more opportunity. So what are the institutions? What are the physical planning? What's the way that we conduct our politics and our discussion that at least keeps those lines open? And it's not a call for sort of, agreement on everything. I mean, democracy, almost by its definition, involves quite vigorous, even passionate disagreement, and that's a good thing. And it's certainly better than the alternative of not having a democracy. But there are important things such as, for example, street trees. Street trees are consistently associated in studies, this country, in Canada and around Europe, with people walking more, with cleaner air, with cars driving more slowly. And if you want to, if you're an economist and don't believe such stuff, with higher house prices, so clearly people do value it. If you can create little green spaces, people are more likely to stop and meet and talk to the neighbours there. If you can create new schools in the middle of a new community as opposed to stuck out on the ring road, and if you can carefully think through the new streets that join there, kids can cycle to school. That's good for their health. It's good for their sense of independence. It's good for their well-being. So little things like this that quite often get pushed down by highways regulations or by costing that little bit more money, it often doesn't, by the way, just matter enormously, and it's very easy to lose them. So that's what we were trying to focus on in Coventry earlier this week.
Now, we're later on in the program, we're going to be talking about the report that has kind of been stifled for now, showing that low traffic neighbourhoods, though, when you stop listening to the loudest voices, you hear people value just the sorts of things that you're talking about. So just talk to me about low traffic neighbourhoods. Lots of controversy, and as I said before, the squeakiest wheels tend to get the attention of politicians. But from your research, from what you do, are they a plus? Are they a minus? What?
Well, I should perhaps say we were so busy with the conference, I haven't had time to read the various reports on the low traffic neighbourhoods. I'm not quite on the latest what that was said on that, so I'll avoid commenting on that. But places in which we maximise choice, i.e., you can drive, but you can also walk, and it's also safe to cycle, and it's easy to get around in multiple ways. If you like, we're maximising freedom, to put it in deliberately odd, perhaps, terminology. Those types of places tend to be more popular. They tend to have healthier, happier residents who know more of their neighbours, and they tend, again, if you want to trust it this way, they tend to be more valuable. So areas in which you don't just have to rely on the car are good things, full stop. That, I think, is unarguable in nearly all circumstances. However, I think it's important. I try and be sympathetic with people I disagree with and try to understand why. So let's imagine you have always driven from A to B. And let's imagine there's not very good public transport and you're scared of cycles. And then someone comes along and changes it and says you can't drive that way anymore. Even if, in fact, ultimately that might be for everyone's benefit, it's not that surprising that you're going to get annoyed about that. And if there are low levels of trust in politicians, which, as a statement of fact, there are, how we move about places, it's reasonably political. So I don't agree with people saying they're a bad idea, but I think some of the complaints about the criticism have actually been very ill-judged as well. It's not immediately a conspiracy theory to get annoyed if someone stops you doing what you do every day. It might ultimately be irrational, it might not be, but it's legitimate to have an interest in how you go to school or how you and I do know people who drive vans or who do service side industries who are genuinely affected by this. So just because it's often a good idea doesn't mean it always is, and it certainly means you need to take people with you. We always say when we're working with councils or with highways authorities on this, trial things first. Do the things that you can build support for: planting street trees, continuous crossings, pedestrianisation on a Sunday, just narrowing the pavement a bit here, and talk not just about movement and cars and being anti-cars. Don't be anti-cars. People need cars, but be pro-place. So what you ask people instead of, can we take away your car? Because you can sort of guess the answer to that. How can we make this village square or this town square or this village green or this high street? How can we make it better? What would make you more likely to walk here? What would make you more likely to let your children run free here without holding their hands? Once you're having that conversation, then you're in a completely different place, and people are in different headsets, and we'll come with you. I was in a historic town a couple months ago. The street, which was largely pedestrianised, but still did actually have cars going down the middle, just in a thin carriageway with bollards. All the shops were taken. It was prosperous. It was thriving. People were there. One street along, tiny pavements, nice wide road at 30 miles per hour. Not that dangerous to speed, but pretty fast for an area. Half the shops were shut. Few people walking there. So actually, rational shop owners should want the first street because they are going to make more money in it. So you need to talk about freedom, talk about movement, and take people with you. That's always what we would say.
Now, Nicholas, listening to you talk and listening to you appreciate the voices of dissent and not get angry with them makes me wish there were more people like you in politics.
I'm not in politics. Like I couldn't do it. I'm too thin-skinned.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the thing is, what seems to happen to many, many normal people, if you like, when they get into politics, they go into the black and white, goodies, baddies. They get polarized, probably because the press, they're pushed into it. They won't get clicks or they won't get headlines unless they come out with something which often is very divisive. All immigrants are this, we should do that, all that, what have you. And coming back to bringing people together, which is why my eye fell upon this headline, because you've got centre right, you've got centre left, and you've got yourselves all together. just makes me wish there were more voices like yours who didn't care about clickbait and cared more about people, God damn it.
Well, thank you very much. I'll let my mum and my wife know you said that. I mean, we've always had politicians, and we've always had that, the tendency to disagree with the other guy or girl because he's on the other side of the aisle. And I wouldn't take that away. I think that is necessary. You need to have constrained disagreement. The point of the House of Commons was it's a sword's length away, so you can shout at each other but not kill each other. And so, to some degree, it's a gladiatorial version of physical combat, and it's better than physical combat. But we just need to have other entities and institutions and ways of having conversations that bring us together. And clearly, social media is toxic on this, and it's just too infusing that ability to get people liking things.
We're out of time, and I wish we had more time to talk to you because I love hearing you. Nicholas Boys-Smith, a lot more to come in the next hour, loads of notes to come, so stay with us here on Talk TV.